She knocked with her last ounce of strength, barefoot, soaked, a baby clutched tight to her chest. Blood stained her hem, and her eyes were wild with fear. The rancher who opened the door said nothing at first. Just took one look and stepped aside. "Come in," he said, voice low. "You are safe now." Behind her, thunder cracked. She whispered, "They are coming." And he reached for the rifle by the door, not with panic, but with purpose. "Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. My name is Clara Dawson. I was once the wife of a preacher, a gentle man named Thomas who believed God could change even the blackest of hearts. He was wrong, and he died for it. We lived in a small clapboard house at the edge of Silver Pine, a church town tucked between wheat fields and sin. Thomas spent his days tending to the Lord's house and his nights scribbling sermons by lantern light. He was a good man. Too good. He took in strangers when others crossed the street to avoid them, fed men with angry eyes, prayed over broken souls. But one spring evening, those broken souls came back with rifles and grins that chilled my bones. They said they had business with my husband. Said his preaching had ruined a deal they were working in the saloon. Said he talked too much. They shot him in our doorway. I was in the next room nursing Ruthie, barely 6 weeks old. I heard his last breath before I heard the door slam. When I ran out, they were gone. But so was my world. The sheriff was no help. Said there was no clear proof who did it. Said the men had influence in 2 counties. I could see it in his eyes, he was scared. I buried Thomas with my own hands. Ruthie strapped to my chest. No one came. No one helped. A week later, I found a note on our doorstep, "You are next." So I ran. I wrapped Ruthie in her swaddling blanket, packed a single satchel, and left before dawn. I walked most of the way. Caught a ride once with a kind old rancher heading west, but he dropped me by the river when I would not explain my bruises. Said he did not want trouble. For 3 weeks I wandered, begged for scraps, slept in barns, once in a hollowed log. Ruthie cried until her voice cracked. I gave her the last of my milk and prayed heaven would send us something. Anything. That something turned out to be a ranch tucked beneath the low hills, isolated, weathered, with a big porch and a bigger silence. I remember standing at the gate, barely able to walk. I had not eaten in 2 days. My feet bled through worn shoes, and the wind howled something awful. I knocked. It was not a scream. It was not a plea. Just one knock. And he opened the door. A tall man, rough in shape, but calm in the eyes. He saw the blood. The baby. Me. And he did not ask one single thing. He said, "Come in." That night, I slept beneath a roof again. Ruthie curled beside me in a real bed. And the man, Silas Hart, sat by the fire in the next room, as still as stone, guarding us like we were his own kin. In the morning, he brought porridge and said, "You do not have to talk until you are ready." I nodded, because for the first time in weeks, I believed him. The first week, I barely spoke. Silas gave me space. He left food on the small table in the bedroom, kept the fire going, and never came closer than the porch. He was like the mountains behind his ranch, solid, unmoving, and strangely comforting. Ruthie slept better than she had in weeks. She stopped fussing and started smiling. I did not. I watched everything. Every sound made me jump. Every hoofbeat down the road made my breath catch. I kept a kitchen knife beneath the mattress, though I doubted I had the strength to use it. But I would die trying if they ever came for her. I had nothing but that child and a body full of fear. Silas never pried. Not once. He asked no questions, made no assumptions. Each morning, he left out bread and eggs and water drawn fresh from the well. Each night, he sat on the porch with a rifle across his lap, not watching me, watching the road. He never locked the front door. I checked. He trusted me. And somehow, that unsettled me more than suspicion would have. On the 7th day, I tried to leave, packed Ruthie on my hip, and stepped onto the porch while he was tending the fence. He looked up, brushed the brim of his hat back, and said, "You're welcome to go, but you do not have to." I did not move. "Storm's coming," he added, nodding to the north. I looked at the sky, heavy gray, full of things I could not name. Then I turned around and went back inside. That night, it stormed like the world was splitting. Ruthie cried, and I held her to my chest, rocking, whispering lullabies I barely remembered. She finally drifted off, and I sat in the dark, listening to the wind scream. That was when I heard it. A quiet knock on the doorframe. Silas. He did not step in. Just stood there in the lantern light with 2 mugs in his hands. "Could not sleep," he said. Thought you might be the same. I nodded. Took the mug. He stayed for a while. No words. Just sat in the rocker across the room while the fire flickered and the storm raged outside. After that, something shifted. I started washing dishes again. Folding sheets. Sweeping corners. Silas never asked, but I could feel the relief in his silence. A house speaks different when it is lived in again. I began cooking small meals. Ruthie started babbling at him whenever he passed. He never picked her up without asking, just held out his hands and waited. If she reached, he smiled. One day, I caught him in the barn tending a wounded foal. The way he whispered to that animal, as if it understood every word, made something ache deep in my chest. That night, I said thank you. Just that. He looked at me, eyes steady. You're welcome. And for the first time since Thomas died, I believed I might still belong somewhere. But peace is a fragile thing, and fear is hard to shake. I woke some nights gasping, convinced I heard boots outside. Once I screamed and woke Ruthie, shaking so bad I could not hold her. Silas came in quietly, took Ruthie in his arms, and hummed the same tune I had used to calm her. I watched from the bed, tears on my face, heart pounding. I had been running so long, I had forgotten what it felt like to be still. And slowly, I wanted to stop running. It was the foal that did it. The little creature had gotten itself tangled in the wire fence behind the barn, a deep gash on its leg bleeding down into the straw. I was hanging sheets when I heard the sharp whinny and the sudden cursing. Ruthie was asleep inside, so I ran. I found Silas crouched in the dust, hands steady, voice low. Easy now, he murmured to the foal. Ain't no one gonna hurt you. He was trying to clean the wound, but the foal kept jerking, wild-eyed with pain. I had seen that same panic once, in my own mirror. I did not think. I knelt beside him, pressing one hand to the foal's neck, the other over its eyes. I whispered a hymn, barely remembered from childhood, and the little thing stilled. Silas looked at me then, really looked. Not like a man caught off guard, like a man seeing something rare. You've got away with the hurting ones, he said, voice soft. I shrugged. Maybe because I've been one. He nodded once, said nothing more. We cleaned the wound together, wrapped it with linen and patience. Afterward, we sat side by side on an overturned feed bin, breath shallow, dirt on our clothes. The barn was warm with sun and hay. I used to think kindness came with a price, I said, staring at the light on the floorboards. Thomas, my husband, he gave it away too easy. And it killed him. Silas did not speak right away. Then, some things are worth giving, even if they cost you. I looked at him. You think that's what you're doing with us? Paying something off. His eyes met mine, clear, steady. No, ma'am. I think I'm finally getting something back. That night, I cooked supper. Cornbread and beans. Nothing special, but mine. I set 3 plates on the table. One for me, one for Silas, one for Ruthie, who only gummed the bread but giggled like it was pie. Silas sat across from me, quiet as always. But when Ruthie reached for his hand, he let her grip his finger tight. After dinner, I cleared the plates. He stood, hesitated, then said, You're safe here, Clara. I turned, hands shaking. I want to believe that, I said. He nodded. Take your time. I watched him leave. Watched the way he moved, cautious, careful, like a man afraid of breaking something too precious to name. And that was the moment it began. Not love, not yet. But trust. Real, steady, painful trust. The kind that does not need to be spoken to be heard. Summer came in hot and heavy, pressing down on the land like a secret. The days were longer now, and the garden Silas planted the year before began to bloom in earnest, beans, squash, wild strawberries. Ruthie had taken to crawling through the rows, chewing on mint leaves and squealing when the breeze rustled her curls. And Silas? He was still quiet, but softer around the edges. He started teaching me to ride again. It had been years since I sat a saddle. The first time, I trembled so badly I nearly slid off. He stood beside me, hand on the bridle. You do not have to, you know. I said, jaw set. He helped me up without another word. I rode that day, just to the fence line and back. But when I dismounted, he handed me a canteen and said, You rode like someone with something to protect. And I realized he was right, because I was not just surviving anymore. I was building something, a rhythm, a life. But peace, as always, stirred whispers. It was on the second trip into town that I saw them. 2 men leaning near the mercantile, eyes lingering on me longer than necessary. Silas noticed, too. He moved closer, not possessive, just steady. One hand near the rifle strapped to the wagon. Inside, the shopkeeper's wife lowered her voice. That you staying out on the Hart Place? I nodded. She looked at Ruthie, then back to me. You be careful. Folks talk. That night, I asked Silas about the men. He stared into the fire for a long time before answering. Not from around here. Bounty types, maybe. Looking for trouble. My blood turned cold. Do they know who I am? He looked at me then, firm, unshaken. I do not care who they think you are. You are not going anywhere. Still, I began to sleep lighter. I kept Ruthie close. I rechecked the doors, the windows. I asked Silas if I could keep a shotgun in the bedroom. He brought it without question. But the fear crept back. One afternoon, I found a scrap of parchment near the front gate. No name. Just 3 words scrawled in angry ink. We remember you. I stood there, wind tugging my apron, stomach churning. I wanted to run. God help me, I almost did. But then I saw Ruthie, laughing in the dirt beside the porch. And I remembered Silas's words. You rode like someone with something to protect. I stepped inside, found him sharpening tools at the table, and handed him the note. He read it, burned it, then said, let them come. He started sleeping by the door after that, rifle always loaded. And still, he never once asked me to leave. He never once acted like I was a burden. He treated me like I was his to protect, and not out of duty. Out of something deeper. And for the first time since Thomas died, I let myself believe. Maybe love could grow from fear. Maybe family did not always have to be born in blood. Sometimes it was born in the fire that 2 people refused to let go out. Have you ever felt more protected by a stranger than by your own family? Share your story in the comments. The day I told him everything, the wind had gone still. It was late past supper. Ruthie was asleep in her cradle, cheeks flushed from sun and play. The crickets had not yet started their song. Silas and I sat out back, side by side, watching the stars begin to poke through the dusk. I had carried the weight of my story for so long it had started to feel like bone, like it belonged to me, unmovable and heavy. But something about the quiet around him, the way he did not push, made me want to speak. Made me believe I could. My husband, I said finally, voice dry. Thomas. He was a preacher. Good man. Too good, maybe. Silas did not move. Just waited. He tried to save men who were already lost. He believed everyone could change, even when they spat in his face. I looked at my hands. They came back one night. The ones he tried to help. Told him to stay out of their business. When he wouldn't, they shot him. Silas's jaw tightened. I continued. I was in the other room with Ruthie. Heard it all. Couldn't even scream. Just ran. And I've been running since. I reached for my tea. My fingers trembled. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, staying here. Maybe I'm bringing danger to your door. Silas turned to me, slow and certain. They put the danger on your shoulders. Not the other way around. But Ruthie, I started. He cut in, voice low but firm. No one touches that baby. Not while I breathe. The word struck something in me. Something deep. I've been afraid every single day since I left, I whispered. Afraid they'd come back. Afraid I wouldn't be enough to protect her. He reached out then, not quick, not forceful. Just laid his hand gently over mine. You already did protect her. You ran. You made it. You brought her to a place where she could grow up free. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sharp. I turned toward him. I thought love died with Thomas. Thought I'd buried it when I buried him. Silas's voice dropped to a hush. Maybe it just changed shape. We sat like that for a long while. Hands touching. Words done. The stars brightened overhead, and for the first time in a long time, I felt no weight in my chest. I felt light. Not because the past was gone, but because I was not carrying it alone anymore. Later that night, I found Ruthie's bonnet on the porch rail, wind-blown and dusty. I picked it up, held it to my chest, and smiled. Because this time, the wind had not taken us. This time we were rooted, and no one was going to pull us out. It was the knock on the door that changed everything. 3 days after I told Silas the truth, things had started to feel almost normal. I had made a stew that didn't burn. Ruthie took her first real steps across the porch. Silas smiled more, spoke softer, and built a small crib in the corner of the bedroom without saying a word. Just placed it there, sanded and warm. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps. Not like Silas. Not like neighbors. He opened the door with his rifle hidden just behind it. A man stood there, grimy, smiling too wide, badge on his coat. A bounty hunter, I recognized at once. They always had that lean, mean look about them. Hungry like wolves. Name's Harlan, he said, tipping his hat. Looking for someone. Preacher's widow. Heard she might be out this way. My blood froze. Silas blocked the doorway. Don't know anyone like that. Harlan sniffed the air. Funny. Poster says she's traveling with a baby. You got toys drying on the porch rail. Silas's voice dropped. You're trespassing. Harlan leaned in, smile turning to a sneer. $10 for the woman. 15 if the kid's alive. Before I could move, Silas stepped out, slammed the door behind him. I heard a scuffle. A thud. Then silence. I opened the door just in time to see Harlan on the ground, clutching his jaw, blood on his lip. You come back, Silas growled, and you'll be leaving in a pine box. The man cursed, spit in the dirt, and limped off toward the trail. Silas came inside, breathing hard. I'm sorry, I said, heart racing. He turned to me, jaw tight. You do not ever apologize for surviving. But that night, fear crept back in like smoke. And guilt. Because someone had told. Someone had recognized me. I found the answer the next morning. One of the ranch hands, a wiry boy named Eli, was gone. His cot empty. His pay untouched. A single note pinned to the barn door. I thought she was dangerous. Just wanted her gone. The betrayal knocked the wind out of me. I went to Silas, shame burning in my throat. You should have let me go when you had the chance. He stared at me like I had slapped him. You think I kept you here for charity? I blinked. You think I built that crib, made space at the table, stood between you and death, because I pity you? He stepped forward, voice shaking, not with anger, but with something deeper. I kept you because I love you. Because Ruthie is the only light this house has known since my brother died in that very field. Because every morning you wake up here, this place remembers how to breathe. I backed away, stunned. Then why didn't you say anything before? He looked down. Because I didn't think I deserved to. I went out into the dark then, Ruthie in my arms, heart broken open. I did not run far, just far enough to cry beneath the stars. Because I realized I had done the same thing. I had let silence steal something sacred. But it was not too late. Not yet. I left just before sunrise. No note. No sound. Just wrapped Ruthie tight against me and walked into the mist, heart hollow, feet numb. I had promised I would never run again. But love makes fools of us all. And I loved him. Too much to stay and let him suffer for me. They knew where I was now. Harlan would come back, and next time, he might not come alone. If anything happened to Silas because of me, I could not live with that. So I did the one thing I knew how to do. I disappeared. The fog swallowed us. Ruthie whimpered softly in her sleep, her tiny fists curled against my chest. I kissed her forehead again and again, whispering, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Like a prayer, like it would fix what I had just broken. We crossed the ridge, followed the river east. By mid-morning, the clouds rolled in, and the sky turned mean. Rain came fast, cold, biting, stinging like regret. My dress was soaked, my hair matted, and the baby's blanket started to unravel in the wind. Still, I pressed on. But the world has its limits. So do women. My legs gave out near a bend in the creek. I fell hard. I tried to shield Ruthie, but the bank was slick, and we slid. Not far, but far enough. I screamed. I called out. Not for help, not for God. For him. Silas. But my voice cracked in the wind. No one answered. I huddled against a tree root, shivering. Ruthie whimpered, her breath shallow. My arms ached from holding her. My skin burned. I could not feel my feet. I thought, this is where it ends. And I made peace with it. Until I heard it. The sound of hooves, fast, sure. A voice calling my name, rough, desperate. Then arms, strong, warm, and shaking, lifting me from the ground. Silas. He wrapped us in his coat, carried us like we weighed nothing. His voice cracked as he whispered, I have you. I have you. Back at the ranch, he laid us by the fire, stripped off my wet clothes with hands that trembled. Not with desire, but with fear. He wrapped me in every quilt he owned, held Ruthie to his chest until her color returned. I slept for hours, maybe more. When I woke, he was still there, watching, waiting. I tried to speak, but tears came first. I thought. He shook his head. You do not run from what is already yours. I was trying to protect you, I said. He leaned close, eyes red. I do not need protecting from the people I love. That was the moment I knew I would never run again. No matter what came, I would face it with him. Because we were no longer just two lost souls. We were a family, forged not by blood, but by choice. I awoke to the smell of wood smoke and lavender. Ruthie was curled up beside me, cheeks pink, breath slow and steady. Silas sat in the chair near the hearth, legs stretched out, one hand resting on the rifle across his lap. Not like he meant to use it, just like he would if needed. The house was quiet, safe, and for the first time, I let myself look at him without fear or caution. He looked older than he had a month ago. Not in a worn-out way, but in a way that meant he had chosen to carry something heavy and refused to set it down. Me, Ruthie, this whole wild, silent hope we had built between us. I sat up slowly. He turned. "You're awake," he said, voice low. I nodded. Then I whispered, "I am sorry for running." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "You do not owe me anything, but you owe yourself the chance to stop running." I stared into the fire. I did not think anyone would come for me. Not really. He stood, walked to the window. Then, almost to himself, said, "I used to think I was meant to be alone. After my brother died, I buried more than just blood. I buried laughter, company, belonging." He looked at me. "And then you knocked on my door." The shift was not loud. It did not come with fireworks or big declarations. It came in the quiet. The way he took Ruthie in his arms, kissed her forehead like he had done it 100 times. The way she smiled, like she had never known a world where he was not hers. The way I saw my name written not on paper, but in the way he made space for me at the table, in the stillness beside him, in the safety he wrapped around our lives like a fence too strong to break. That night, I did not cry. I sat with him while the fire burned low, and we passed the time with silence. Because now, silence did not mean fear. It meant peace. It meant we understood each other without needing to be told. It meant I was home. Later, when I laid Ruthie in her new crib, I whispered words I had never dared say aloud before. "We are not alone anymore." She stirred but did not wake. And in that soft breath between day and night, I felt something sacred settle in my chest. We were not just surviving. We were becoming. A week after he found us by the river, I returned to town. I could have waited, could have sent Silas instead. But I needed to look folks in the eye. I needed them to see I was not hiding anymore. We hitched the wagon just after sunrise. Ruthie sat between us, chewing on a corner of her quilt, while Silas handled the reins with quiet focus. The road into Silver Pine looked the same, but I felt different. Stronger. Like my spine had been straightened by truth and fire. At the Mercantile, the same two men who had watched me before stood near the porch. This time, I met their eyes and did not flinch. Silas helped me down, offered no words, just his hand, open and steady. Inside, I asked for flour, sugar, and soap. The shopkeeper's wife nodded. She said nothing about the rumors. Only added a little ribbon for Ruthie, free of charge. When we stepped outside, I saw her, Mrs. Alder, the preacher's widow who used to sit in the third pew with her gloves folded neat. She stared at me a long time, then crossed the street. "You still believe in God after all that happened?" she asked, her tone sharp as a sewing needle. I looked down at Ruthie, then at Silas, who waited by the wagon with patience carved into his face. "I do," I said. "But I believe he sometimes answers prayers with people instead of lightning." She blinked, surprised. Then she nodded once and walked away. That afternoon, I unpacked our supplies and found something at the bottom of the sack, a folded note in neat handwriting. "If you ever teach again, I have a niece who could use your strength." No signature, just quiet acknowledgement. Later that week, I swept out the old barn and started drawing lessons in the dust, letters, words, prayers. Ruthie watched me with wide eyes, clapping every time I finished a word. Silas built a little bench from scrap wood and set it outside the barn door. "Could hold 2 or 3, he said. And it did. By the end of the month, I had 3 children from the outskirts of town learning their letters on that bench. 2 widows came to sit in the back just to listen. I had no license, no classroom, but I had a voice again. And it was stronger now, not because it was loud, but because it was rooted in something real. Silas never asked why I taught. He just brought lemonade to the barn on hot days and watched from a distance with a kind of reverence I had only ever seen in church. At night, after Ruthie fell asleep, we sat on the porch and said nothing at all. Because the kind of peace we had now could not be spoken. It had to be lived. By autumn, folks had stopped whispering. They nodded now. Asked after Ruthie. Left canned peaches on the porch and pies with our name carved into the crust. It happened slow, like all real change does, but it happened. I was no longer just the preacher's widow. I was Miss Clara, the woman with the school in the barn. The one who always had a story in her hands and a child on her hip. Silas called me wife, once in front of the blacksmith, and my knees went weak. We were not married, not yet. But it no longer felt like a question. He had built me a life, brick by brick, not with grand words but with quiet choices. A garden where I once had none. A chair at the table. A place to belong. And I had filled it. I taught 6 children now. Ruthie joined the class, sitting on my lap with a tiny slate in her hands. She scribbled circles and laughed at her own work. At night, I wrote letters to her future. Dear Ruthie, if you ever feel like you are not enough, remember, you come from women who endured and men who stayed. Silas found one of the letters once, tucked it in his pocket. He did not mention it, but I saw him touch it when the wind picked up. Then one morning I found a ring. Simple silver, looped with tiny etchings of wheat stalks, resting in a box on the kitchen table. No note, just a single daisy beside it. I turned to find him behind me, holding Ruthie in one arm and a nervous look on his face. She already said yes, he said, nodding at Ruthie. Thought I might ask the both of you proper. I laughed and cried and nodded all at once. That Sunday, under the apple tree, we stood with Ruthie between us and pledged what we had already been living. He said, I promise to stand with you in the storm and in the still. I said, and I promise to never run again. The preacher blessed us with weathered hands. The town brought food and music. Ruthie danced barefoot in the dirt. It was not fancy, but it was ours. And I realized then, I was no longer just someone who had been saved. I was someone who had chosen to love, chosen to stay, chosen to become. Peace, once earned, is not easily stolen. But some shadows stretch long. It happened just before winter. The wind had started to bite in the mornings, and frost kissed the pumpkins near the barn. We were finishing up lessons when I noticed him, Harlan, the bounty hunter, riding slow down the main trail. He was not alone this time. Another man rode beside him. Younger, sharper-eyed. I recognized neither, but I knew the look. Men paid to track, to scare, to take. Silas stepped out onto the porch before they could dismount. I thought I made myself clear, he said, rifle resting casual across his arms. Harlan smiled, wide and cold. We're just here for a conversation. Silas did not blink. Say what you came to say, and say it standing back from my gate. The other man stepped forward. That woman in there, Clara Dawson. She's wanted in Wilkes County, harboring stolen property. A child that belongs to the Holloway estate. My stomach dropped. Ruthie was in my arms. Her little fingers played with the collar of my shawl, unaware. She's mine, I said, stepping out. The men looked past me. Dismissed me. She's evidence, the younger one said. Proof of an inheritance claim. That baby's father owed money. She's part of the debt. Silas shifted. She's a child, not a sack of silver. Harlan reached into his coat. I've got papers. Silas cocked the rifle. And I've got bullets. Each one signed for men who try to lay claim to what is not theirs. The moment stretched. I stepped forward, trembling but sure. You can take your papers and burn them, I said. Ruthie is mine by birth and by blood. And if you think I'll hand her over because 2 strangers scribbled lies on parchment, you have not met many mothers. The younger man's hand drifted toward his belt. Silas raised the rifle. And then, from behind us, came the sound of boots. Lots of them. Neighbors. Friends. The blacksmith. The preacher. Mrs. Alder, her cane in hand. They stood in a crooked line at our fence, arms crossed, faces firm. We know her, the preacher said. We know her baby. And we know this town does not hand over its own. The bounty men saw the crowd and did the math. They turned, spat once in the dirt, and rode off. Silas lowered the rifle. I sank to my knees, Ruthie clutched tight. The townsfolk stayed a while, silent, respectful. Then left, one by one. Later, when the sun dipped low, Silas found me on the porch. I was ready to kill for you, he said softly. I looked up, eyes still wet. I was ready to die for her. He knelt beside me, kissed the top of my head. You did not have to. Not this time. No, not this time. This time we were protected. Not just by one man with a rifle, but by a whole town that had decided I was worth standing for. And that changed everything. I still rise early. Old habits do not vanish, they soften. I make coffee while the sky turns from lavender to gold. Silas stirs the fire and checks the barn. Ruthie, now 3, sleeps in longer these days, curled beneath a quilt stitched with her name. When I sit on the porch and listen to the wind in the grass, I often think back to that first night. The knock, the fear, the quiet man with calloused hands who said, "You're safe now." Safe. A word I never believed in until this place, this life, this man. The school in the barn has grown. 10 children now, and a little bell that Ruthie rings before we begin. They call me Miss Clara. Some even call me ma'am. No one calls me widow anymore. That word lost its shape. I am wife, mother, teacher, belonging not borrowed. Silas still does not talk much, but his eyes say everything. When he walks past, he runs a hand along my back, gentle as rain. When he looks at Ruthie, it is as if he sees the sunrise in her smile. And Ruthie, God, that girl is fierce. She laughs like thunder and sings to the chickens. She tells the other children that her papa builds everything strong enough to last forever. She does not remember the running, only the safety that came after. Sometimes I wonder what Thomas would say if he could see us. I think he would forgive me for loving again, for choosing life instead of living in mourning. He once said, "The Lord speaks in second chances." I think Silas was mine. I keep writing letters, still tuck them into a jar, one for each of us. To Ruthie, I write, "You were born in a storm, but you grew in sunlight. You are not what tried to break you. You are what chose to heal." To Silas, "You never raised your voice, but you gave me back mine. You stood with me in every quiet way that mattered." And to myself, "You are not a woman saved. You are a woman found, and you are worth keeping. Some women are born into safety. Others have to walk through fire to find it. I was the second kind. I was hunted, haunted, widowed, and worn. But in the quiet shadow of a weathered ranch house, I found something I did not expect. Room to breathe, a place to rest, and a man who never asked me to be less than I was." Silas did not rescue me with words. He did it with actions, building a cradle, teaching Ruthie to plant seeds, standing between me and danger without once asking for anything in return. That is what love looks like when it is real. It does not parade. It does not push. It stands quietly, ready, and stays when others leave. We are not the same people we were when I knocked on his door. And thank God for that. We are a family now, not because we share blood, but because we chose each other. Day after day, fear after fear, until the choosing became a promise. If you are out there listening, and you have ever felt like safety is something meant for other people, I want you to know this. You are not too far gone. You are not too broken. You are not too late. There is still a place for you. And sometimes it looks like a worn porch, a child's laughter, and a man with a heart big enough to carry your story without flinching. Thank you for spending time with Clara's story. Was there a part of her journey that echoed something in your life? I'd love to know. Share in the comments. When did you stop running, and what made you stay? If this story touched your heart, follow for more Wild West love stories full of hope, healing, and home. Because the best endings are not the loudest. They are the ones that last.